If you have been the person, and as a lot of small businesses are, who have to think about new things, stand on your feet, deal with challenges coming newly and what you do, I think it's going to be a bullish for you because that part of the puzzle is not going to be really replaced by AI. I know it's really counterintuitive because people think it's the small side which is going to be impacted the most. But if your job and profile and what you do is more a steady state, especially on the white collar side, if you're sort of, not to use a pejorative word, but if you're been a paper pushing kind of job and what you do, I mean, that is already going away very quickly.
Welcome to another episode of The Human Code. I'm here with my new buddy, Vijay Raghavan. Vijay, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you taking the time to connect. And the only question I got for you right now is what got you interested in the intersection of humanity and technology?
It's interesting that, anyway, thanks for having me on, Don. It's a real pleasure. It's interesting. It's been an evolution. I was always, I guess, more interested, like in young kids, about things. So the technology interest was pretty common, right? I like many a young boy, I like to tinker with stuff, bring apart clocks, bring apart any kind of machinery you do. And so what I've evolved in my career in technology and in all in things. I think the evolution to the human factor is really, like a lot of engineers, is probably the more renovation part to me. And for me, it was a classic awakening. I went to the classic path, did my undergrad engineering and my graduate school in engineering as well, and did the dream of the Silicon Valley startup. Uh, and things weren't going great. We built a new product. It went out. We launched. We made our first few $1 million, and then suddenly things went poof, right? And it was a classic issue of an engineer thinking of what is important is three things, right? Which is technology, technology, and technology. And the realization that, hey, uh, this is not any unique human endeavor. It involves the same kind of strive and drives which other human endeavors do. And that really got me to the intersection of, hey, what makes a team successful? What makes it sort of that interface with technology work? And how can you really make 1 + 1 = 3 here? And I must say, I've not never, I won't say I've even mastered that after 20 years. It's still a learning exercise, and how the human technology interface works is a continued learning lesson every day.
I think that's one of the most fascinating things about humanity is that we are a set of walking contradictions.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it's just that experience of learning how people behave and how we kind of like walk through. But um, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the experience that you had of kind of understanding that like, hey, technology is a leg of this, but it's not the whole thing. Um, where are you placing value now?
Mhm.
What are the capacities that you're looking at solutions today then?
Yeah, so I think really it comes to what I think comes from both from a team dynamic perspective as well as from your stakeholders perspective, right? What I find is what make things tick uh, for is highly dependent on what needs to be done, obviously what the capabilities of people are, but more importantly, what their motivation and their nature is, and how does it evolve and drive it, right? So it means that different types of capabilities and drivers work very differently in different people and even different cultural environments, and how those kinds of adhere together. I would take an example, right? I've spent my last, I would say, 10 to 12 years building technologies and new innovation within the context of large companies, right? And I always thought that uh, American companies are highly bureaucratic, don't know how to do things, and don't work and drive. But once you start spanning your world of how things are internationally, you kind of have a deja vu, right? There's a reason why American companies have done so well. And I think it's part of an inherent trait of the American character of openness, willingness to fail, and generally be goofballs. right? If need be, right? You don't really need to take your life too seriously and how you take and drive things. And I think that is what is, to me, the fascination about technology and driving things. It gives everybody an aspect to not try to be a perfectionist, right? Especially as technology is evolving now. It's not that you have to carve something in stone and you make a mistake, it's there forever, and then you'll take 20 years redoing it. It's a ability to kind of continuously reinvent yourself and reinvent how things work. And what I've been really caught up now is obviously like I guess everybody is how AI and AI works together in terms of where the humans go. How does it work in terms of how organizations work? How does it work on how people work against it? And not to get ahead of myself, but I'm highly bullish on the future, right? On how things can work. There are a lot of people who are skeptical in terms of how um, the impact it'll have. Uh, but to me, it is yet another evolution of technology, and it's going to just people have to adapt. And I'm highly bullish on the American ability to adapt and make this a successful part of our future.
Like one of the things that you touched on was the bureaucracy of companies, and then additionally, like we're looking at this, wave of AI that's kind of like coming out, and there's been a huge investment in the hardware side of it, the distribution hyperscalers, and uh, we're starting to see the application layer taking hold as well. How do you see this impacting companies?
So I think ultimately you have to look at anybody who there is kind of I characterize it as kind of three kinds of things which happen in any cycle, right? There are people who need to think about create things and how they work and get it in place. There's a stage of people who sort of try to run. And if you have been the person, and as a lot of small businesses are, who have to think about new things, stand on your feet, deal with challenges coming newly and what you do, I think it's going to be a bullish for you, right? Because that part of the puzzle is not going to be really replaced by AI. I know it's really counterintuitive because people think it's the small side which is going to be impacted the most. But if your job and profile and what you do is more a steady state affair, especially on the white collar side, uh, if if you sort of, hey, you're not to use a pejorative word, but if you're been a paper pushing kind of job and what you do, I mean, that is already going away very quickly, right? So, but again, if you're working with your hands, blue collar work, or even white collar work, right? If you're involved in actually any job which requires you to be thinking on your feet, right? It's only going to be a boom for you. And from all my years of managerial experience, I've seen people who think on their feet. One of the most frustrating parts for them has been to deal with the paper pushing side of things, right? So, and it's actually going to enable their life much better. You don't need as many people to be behind you to push paper, and new opportunities are going to come up. Now, to be fair, there is a fair criticism of hey, how do all these white collar jobs get replaced, right? Because look, there is going to be a shrinkage on because there's going to be a lot of more efficiency uh, and you could have two schools of thought on that. And hey, just like typewriters went away, they'll find new place to do things, or the other perspective, they'll never be replaced. Nobody has a crystal ball on that. But I think the whole angst about hey, everybody's going to be out on the street because AI is going to be like the Terminators. I don't think is anywhere true in any of our lifetimes. Uh, I've seen it in action on how it's made so many companies. That's what I can help companies do every day. Help them optimize their cycle, help them grow business. And again, it is. I go back to this, right? It is a boom to people who are comfortable with change and change on a daily basis. If you're type of the individual or company who says, "Hey, I want to set up a 5-year plan in place and that's how I operate," uh, it's the kiss of death, right? Because you're going to be having your competitors with much less profile, much less drivers walk around you, and that's both on a company basis and on a personal basis. How much of a self-starter of you? And each person needs to think, right? Hey, how much are you willing to do things yourself, right? If you're kind of the person who's willing to roll up their sleeves, It gives you infinite tools and capabilities of a machine to do whatever you want. If you're not, I think you have more challenges.
But also, what you were saying around, I think, the bureaucracy of companies, right? Like, there's definitely this. The bureaucracy is there because it allows us to have some steady state and process and decision making and have an organization that is aligned with itself.
Mhm.
Um, but then we also see this disruption in this technology that can help to remove that. Um, the other side of this is we're seeing companies that are either hesitant to be adopting it. We're seeing companies that are going full bore and not letting anything go aside as far as like what they're trying to do, but they don't have a clear path to what it actually means for them.
Yep,
And so, just like with any change management type of project or initiative, right, without a clear goal, you really don't know where you're going. And
sure.
at the other side of this is, a technology that is akin to basically electricity, right? Like there's
Yes,
no application in which it doesn't play out. So,
that's a great
um,
model. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm definitely not the one who came up with it. So, can play on that. But like what I'm seeing or finding out is that one, like we do AI solutions as well. And like for smaller businesses, it's sometimes easier for them to adopt if they have the pattern of exploration, playfulness, and they allow for that environment of like, hey, it's okay to make a mistake in these
Absolutely.
areas, right? Like, and here's where we grow when we bring it to a place where we need to be 100% like accurate, then we take a very slow approach, but like here's the playground. And so like go ahead. The other side of this is I think the technology isn't going to be limited by how fast the technology can grow, but how fast humans can actually adopt it into their business and into their practices. And so
100%.
hopefully that's a bit of a gut change to how disruptive the technology is. But then the other side of it, I know that like we serve financial services companies, right? When one of our CEOs of a client uses it, or like one of their directors, VPs, whoever, any advisor in their business uses our system, the results that they get are better than the results that I would get for the same analysis. And there's this thing that I'm seeing is that the person operating the system
Mhm.
is just as important as the system itself. And to your point of like you know, the systems, it's important to see who drives it.
Mhm.
Um, I think we're seeing that as well. And then on the other side of this, I still feel more comfortable in some situations of being able to pick up the phone and talk to a person
Mhm.
and knowing that that person is there to do it, even if like the AI has been rock solid on 95% of the things. There's something about that human connection that just creates that comfort in any sort of like large transaction that we're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think to touch on that a little bit, right? I think it's sort of but going back to your first point, I mean, look, clearly bureaucracy is not a bad word, right? It has a place and it has a design for what was created and a purpose. The question, like any tool, they're all double-edged sword and double-sided swords, and how do people use these appropriately or not, right? So to take your example, right, on what it is, what I've found in this is, look, AI is imperfect too, right? So what happens is, look, so if you look at a classic structure of any analysis-driven firm, right? Take a financial institution case. You classically have a set of analysts, right? Who kind of generate some of the information on what it does, and it sort of moves up a cycle of knowledge discovery and then decision making on typical chain of how things drive. So the issue really which AI has helped and hurt in this whole cycle, talking when you come back into touch is if sort of the bottom side generation starts become purely AI driven, right? Without the right analysis tool, people in place to do it, like they tend to hallucinate, right? And they tends to be garbage and garbage are issues. And if people take this at face value without checking things or being able to touch, to your point, the human person who touches and drives it, you end up in a pretty black place because you sort of end up with quite erroneous information. And it's just like even now, right? Um, when you, as a financial institution, take research reports out from the field, uh, if all you're doing is taking their what they're saying as absolute truth, right? You end up in a pretty bad place pretty soon. You might get lucky for a while, but sooner or later you're going to really screw up badly. It's the same cycle, right? Which AI has made that cycle faster, quicker, and cheaper. But the amount of error data coming in is really bad, right? Because what has happened is a lot of people are publishing a lot more data because the capability of doing it is faster, but that doesn't mean the quality of the data has necessarily improved. So, and I think especially financial companies which deal purely in information are at the biggest risk of this because the ability to generate data, typically, if you, for example, if you generate a market analysis report, let's say it's 15 years ago, uh, you might know the person who did it made some errors, but at least you know that person had to dig through stuff, do things, and unless they're deliberately trying to falsify things, you know you will get a halfway decent report. But the cost of actually creating something has become so cheap, and that risk has amplified a lot. And I think companies are still struggling culturally. How do they change themselves to deal with that problem, right? And to your point is perhaps it's the human interface side, right? Where there has to be touch points across the chain, much more constant communication to cross-check people, have people actually check the data, driven things, have assumptions right. Uh, because who knows what assumptions these models have made? Because at least in the past you could talk to somebody, now you have no clue. Uh, s-
Which is an
and
interesting point because
yeah.
one of the lessons that we've learned in our implementations is that every agent inside a business needs to report to a human,
Mhm.
and it may report to another agent, but that stack and that workflow needs to report to a human because the human needs to be the one who's validating not every answer, but basically validating it on the whole, ensuring that it has the right eval set up for it. And then additionally, is it receiving the right information to do its job? And is it doing the right job as well? And so when the human has those three responsibilities, it helps to kind of give you that backstop of like, hey, when I'm seeing something that's off of this, I know that I got to go to Peter, and like he's the guy who understands this. And most of the time we're able to get it to be somebody in the business and not in technology, but at the same time there's that nice kind of like cross part
Uh,
that goes.
how well how well have you found the humans adapting to those roles and doing them well?
um I think it fits in with any other change management. You have 10% of the population that's like ready to go, then you have 90% that is of different varieties of ready to go, right? Like some aren't really wanting change, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a good portion of the population. And then you have another part that's like ready to learn but unfamiliar with what the change is going to be. And then there's the other side that is like ready to learn but doesn't have the mental process as far as what it's going to be. And so like we see probably those four categories coming up. Um, and usually it's trying to find those people that are like raring to go and ready to launch. Now the other side of that is those people that are ready to launch, ready to go,
Mhm.
you got to give them a safe sandbox for them to kind of explore
Mhm.
with the right boundaries.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like that's a pretty strong population of who's ready to like learn about it, who's ready to help you in that implementation.
Yeah, no, that's well said because I think the skill sets you need to be obviously in order to ask the right questions of these agents and to analyze what it is, it requires a not just a knowledge base on what the problem is, but also a very different way of thinking, right? And going back to my previous example, It's a much more analytical way of thinking of uh, probing as opposed to just asking for information. And I think that it some people have adapted well to it, but to your point, the majority have to. There's a retraining process which needs to take place to help people think in that way. Mhm.
And it's, I mean, we're seeing a different set of skills come out as well. We have some engineers on our team that, on the younger side, and they are early in their career. They're very excited about technology. They're really excited to bring things out. And what the technology is requiring them to do now is, instead of being more technical, the soft skill of managerial is coming into it, because
Yep.
now you're not only technically responsible for the work, but now you're delegating that work to another form of intelligence to do. And in a vibe coding type of scenario, you can get away with some stuff. But when you're building it for enterprise or even for small business, what you need to be doing, and also for maintainability, security, et cetera, right? Like the other non-functional requirements that come into it that you've got to maintain over the course of, years, not just a couple of months or a nice demo. That requires a different level of looking at the problem. And where, if you're seasoned in your career, you kind of understand, like, I know that security is a thing, so I'm going to put a body in that seat, where
Mhm.
you're budgeting out and recognizing that. Well, in today's world, you may not put a body there, but there's an activity, and you've got to know enough about that activity to draw the boundary around it, and also know where it needs to sit in your process to flow. So it's data engineering, not just on your platform, but it's data engineering on your process at the same time as you're building your product or platform. So I find myself educating on not just like how to do something now, but more on like the entrepreneurial kind of like finding answers to questions or solving problems, and trying to train autonomy and agency into team members over like technical skills lately.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? So I think the other way I would state what you said, right? A person at the ground level now is capable and has to, not even just capable, needs to operate at a level which typically they would have been probably 3, 4 years in and have a sense of what's going on around them, how the drivers, what the security boundaries, and get that experience to do it. So you're putting so the answer, I mean, either you say that, hey, I am somehow being able to train these people at the ground level to use these tools effectively, or you're saying in the other ways, which I've seen companies go is, uh, I'm having a person at the more senior level operate this, right? Without the ground level thing in place, uh, which is also a problem because a lot of those people who have been there and especially large companies have, to put it mildly, have forgotten to work with their hands, right? To do it, they have sort of become on the managerial stack of things. So that doesn't work very effectively either. So finding the balancing act between those two is a trick which I think is still evolving and has to see how it'll go. Yeah,
It's an interesting time that we have right now.
yeah. I mean, so for example, I can just take even for myself, right, on a small consulting thing now, right? So the number of analysts I have are sort of very few, right? Because the expectation is me myself are going to use the tools to do this. Uh, and I enjoy doing it because I enjoy working with my hands and sort of analyzing, looking at spreadsheets and looking at things and drivers, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, and honestly, I find in the companies which have small business a classic example because the proprietors are used to doing it and working with their hands, and it's going to be a boom for them. Once you go to the larger places and people are used to staring at PowerPoint and making decisions, that's where they have to change quickly. Otherwise, they are going to be in trouble.
I think probably the best example of that desire or that need to change quickly comes from the cybersecurity risk.
Hmm.
and this is going to play out whether it's cybersecurity or any other risk that sits on your SWOT analysis as far as threats go. But when you sit there and look at like what can happen with cybersecurity in today's models, they can attack you and basically figure everything out to get through your systems by the time that your risk analysis team gets together to have the meeting to discuss what you plan on doing about it.
Yeah.
And
So
so, yeah,
no, I mean I think that's a great example of human. I just want an example of mine came to mind of
yeah, yeah,
companies worked with, right? How they work through a spoofing attack of somebody coming in is they sent a text from the CEO, right? Saying that, hey, go and give me access to something, right? And this is a classic sign of a bureaucratic company where, hey, you just listen to what the CEO says, right? Hey, it's a CEO. Who am I to say anything else, right? And that aspect of not thinking holistically from a security perspective, or even thinking, hey, a CEO won't ask me to do something like this, it sort of opens you up. So it's the same. It's interesting that the same nature which causes you to have the security issues in the first place become much more exploitable now and vulnerable. And it's a great example you took there.
yeah. Vijay, I got to say, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Just one last question for you. Like if somebody was either A, starting their career right now, or B, kind of, looking at, how they play their role today, what
Mhm.
advice would you have for them?
Yeah, no, I think I would say is even before the career start, right? I would really think from an educational perspective, uh, people are too caught up in getting deeply specialized in a very specific narrow skill set and are forgetting on the basics skills of what it takes to think, right? So if you bring that picture in of what it takes to think in terms of, hey, what are the different aspects of the business of what works, and have a more rounded skill set into very sharp, narrow things of what you do, and bring that eagerness and mindset of thinking holistically of what the problems are into the job you do. None of us can predict uh, what's going to happen even 3 years from now, right? Things are moving so fast. But what I can say for what I can virtually guarantee is if you brought yourself and got yourself an education and thought process and every day you're thinking of not how to think, how to holistically think of the problems around you, not just in your job, in the surrounding job of the people above you and below you and drivers, that holistic perspective you bring in will be invaluable. And it'll be a time where I think it actually pushes such people forward. In the past, you could argue were punished for it because you were so measured on a very small, tiny fragment of what you did, and that's all that mattered. But those days are gone, right? I think it's back to the world of the generalist, and because the highly specialized point things, technology is going to do it for you.
Very good points. Again, I got to say, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Pleasure, Dom.